say?
Luigi, want to say something?
Yes.
Stay inside the press box.
The floor private healthcare system is unjust, it's corrupt,
We shouldn't have to fight. Healthcare is a human right. We shouldn't have to fight. We shouldn't have to fight. Healthcare is a human right. Luigi!
When I say free, you say Luigi! Free!
Luigi!
Free!
Luigi!
The crime of murder in the first degree and other related charges. How do you plead to this indictment, sir? Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Accused killer Luigi Mangione back in court, this time for the charges he faces in New York State, wearing khakis and a maroon sweater, shackled at the wrists and ankles. The camera in court capturing the 26-year-old as he faces 11 state charges that include murder in the first degree and murder in the second degree as a crime of terrorism for the alleged killing of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson.
He's a young man, and he is being treated like a human ping pong ball.
His attorney slamming the way Mangione was paraded before cameras when being brought back to New York City from Pennsylvania.
They are literally treating him like he is like some sort of political fodder, like some sort of spectacle.
During the arraignment, with rare camera access being allowed to record the proceedings, prosecutors disclosing just how much evidence they have.
I have never seen a case with such volume of evidence, aside from the issue of the quality of the evidence. This is not a usual case in terms of the thousands of hours of video tracking and the like.
Mangione seen smiling at times while talking with his legal team. Outside court, a small group of protesters gathered to voice their support for Mangione.
Healthcare is a human right. We shouldn't have to fight.
The hearing ended with Mangione casually folding some papers before police escorted him away.
Luigi, do you have anything to say?
Mangione also faces federal charges that include murder through the use of a firearm. The state trial is expected to come first. Mangione faces a maximum sentence of life in prison for the state charges, and prosecutors could decide to seek a death penalty in the federal case.
And CNN's Kara Scannell was also inside that courtroom and joins us now. So, Kara, bring us up to speed in terms of how it all went down and what happened.
Yeah, the whole arraignment took just about 20 minutes. Mangione was led into the courtroom, as you could see. They're in plain clothes with his ankles and his wrists shackled. There was the shackling around his waist as well. He was surrounded during the entire hearing by a wall of by a wall of court officers. And during the hearing, Mangione spoke just once when he entered his plea of not guilty, but his lawyer did use the moment as an opportunity to raise some of these concerns that she has about there being federal charges, which he was indicted, or he was charged with last week, and he had his first court appearance in that case on Thursday, and then these state charges where he was indicted on 11 felony counts. And today was his arraignment on those counts. So she had raised questions about the politicalization of this as well, pointing to the perp walk where Mangione got off that helicopter, walked down the long pier in New York City before he came to federal court on Thursday. She raised the the issue that New York City's Mayor Eric Adams was there, saying that he was politicizing this, even quoting from some of him, while also saying that Adams himself should know something about the presumption of innocence because he is facing federal bribery charges. Adams has pleaded not guilty to those charges. So this was the first, appearance that Mangione's had in state court. They scheduled another appearance for February, but there was an issue here too about where he will be in custody, whether he will stay in federal custody or if he will be in state custody. The judge asking the prosecutor, who's a 30-year veteran of the office, who has primary custody of this defendant, and he said he believed the state does, but he said it was something that they had just gotten permission to take him out of federal custody for this hearing, so the judge telling him they need to figure out where Mangione is going to be housed as this case moves forward, both on a state track and on the federal track. Mangione is expected to be back in federal court in January for his arraignment on those charges. Rahel?
Let's get right out to Lisa Rosner. She's live outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Lisa, what's going on there?
Well, Alice, as you mentioned, Mangione just pleaded not guilty, but outside the courthouse, behind all the media where I'm standing, there's about 24 people here standing in support of Mangione, chanting that there should be justice for Luigi. But right now, from what we know, Allie Bauman is inside the courtroom. She tells us this is wrapping up, but just now Mangione's attorney made a couple of requests to the judge, including requesting immediate expedited discovery in this case, saying that the people have had this case for almost 3 weeks, and that was more than enough time to gather info, especially now that there are 2 proceedings happening. As we know, Mangione is charged 11 charges here in state court, but he also faces 4 federal counts, including stalking and murder, and that, if convicted on those counts, he would be eligible for the death penalty. Now, we know also from here inside state court, and just looking through Allie's very detailed notes, as I said, she is in court, we do know that Mangione, she said, it was cooperative, and she made an issue about what we saw last week when Mangione was extradited from Pennsylvania to here in New York. You may remember he was taken here by helicopter, flanked by heavily armed guards. Mangione's attorney telling the judge that he was cooperative. There was no reason for the NYPD to have big assault rifles. And she said it was perfectly choreographed. She also complained about New York City's mayor. Now, earlier we spoke to someone who is a former FBI agent about the charges that he is facing in federal court.
So all it does is there are nails in the prosecution's case that help seal these matters to make sure they get a successful prosecution. But keep in mind, the investigation is still continuing. It's not over yet.
And here in state court, we know that Mangione's next court appearance will be February 21st. Back to you.
All right, Lisa, thank you. And here to break down what is going on in court today, attorney Rich Schoenstein.
He is a partner with Tarter, Krinsky and Drogan. Let's get right into it. And can you talk about the differences between the federal charges and the state charges here?
Absolutely. Well, the state charges are first-degree murder, including that terrorism aspect, which is what gets you from second-degree murder up to first-degree murder. 2 charges of first-degree murder, and then a bunch of charges for the weapon and some charges for a forged document. The federal charges have to do with federal activity, which is basically crossing state lines. So there's 2 charges of stalking, using interstate commerce or going across state lines. And then there's that murder charge on the federal level, which is pled as a top-tier federal murder count, and that in the federal system carries the possibility of the death penalty.
Now, I want to ask you, too, with this 11-count indictment here in state court, you were talking about murder in the first degree, and it says caused the death of Brian Thompson and that he was allegedly killed in furtherance of an act of terrorism. How difficult is it going to be for the Manhattan DA's office to prove this terrorism aspect? What sort of evidence, would they need to show?
Well, it is probably the most difficult aspect of the crime to prove, because ordinarily to prove murder, you don't have to prove anything about motive. You just have to prove that a person did it, perhaps did it intentionally. Here, you're going to have to prove that the murder was done for some sort of purpose that would convince a jury it's an act of terrorism, sending a message, striking fear in the heart of people who work in the healthcare industry, some sort of public-facing purpose to the murder that would constitute a terroristic act.
What do you know of the timeline of these cases? When will we see him back in court? When might we see the trials in this case?
So it's a good question. I mean, the first question is what's going to proceed first, the federal or the state charges? Now, typically, I expect the federal charges to move quicker. I expect a federal prosecution to move quicker, although the state case is a little more straightforward. And that's a matter that will be coordinated and maybe even negotiated by the prosecutors involved. The attorney, as you said during your report, is already pushing for discovery. His lawyers want the evidence right away. They want whatever's been gathered so they can start poking at it, so they can do their own investigation, so they can see how good the case is. I would expect him to be on trial perhaps in the second half of next year. Could take a little bit longer, but I expect this case will move pretty briskly.
Here we go.
Good.